Take the first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
All right, Gordon. Well, let's go then. It's Sunday, the 28th of July, 9 o'clock in the morning, UK time. And I'm just putting on a sock while we're talking.
Good morning. Sunday morning. Good morning.
Actually, my head's a little bit full of Trump, because he was at a Bitcoin conference, I think the world's largest Bitcoin conference, or the largest one in the US, yesterday.
He's been saying good stuff about Bitcoin as Trump.
Sorry?
He's been saying good stuff about Bitcoin as Trump. He's been saying some positive stuff.
Yeah, which I think is encouraging, because one, I think he's a gold guy. I understand that he likes gold, so he gets the value of sound money.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin is sound money. And then the other thing that I think Bitcoin does, and gold does, and silver does, it makes it harder for governments to fund war. You can't just print off a whole load of Bitcoin. I mean, if we had a Bitcoin economy, how would it work, right? It would be, okay, you want to go to war, Gordon, you'd have to go to the marketplace to buy Bitcoin. And you go to the marketplace and you start buying Bitcoin, well, the Bitcoin gets more expensive. So then it's not worthwhile. And then the other thing you could do, you could issue certificates, like currency that's backed by Bitcoin, except because Bitcoin's on the blockchain and it's transparent, people could actually see whether or not you've got the Bitcoin to back those certificates.
Yeah.
It would just be unaffordable. So then, Gordon, you'd have to sit down with racist, white supremacist peacemongers like Viktor Orban.
Right.
He's now a far right.
Von der Leyen said it was an appeasement mission. It wasn't a peace mission. It was an appeasement mission. It's like these people are living in a different reality to the rest of us, right? That we can clearly see here, and we have seen right from the very beginning, and we're no smart military mind, that Ukraine is not going to beat Russia. And we can see that this was a proxy war on behalf of NATO in order to weaken Russia and to basically cut Russia off from the European market so they couldn't sell their oil to him. That's what all this was. And you saw that with the blowing up of Nord Stream pipeline. Who did that, by the way? Nobody seems to want to find out. And we can clearly see what it is. And we can clearly see here, as John Mearsheimer pointed out back in 2015, Ukraine was being led up the primrose path. And here we are. You know, Europe has picked this fight with Russia, and Europe picked the fight with them with the shelling of the Donbass and the support of the Ukrainians, and the turning a blind eye to the Ukrainians violating the Minsk agreements, which people like Angela Merkel have come out and said, oh, the Minsk agreements were basically just a way of us being able to build up the Ukrainian army before this went in, and that's basically all it was. I think the guy in Italy, Berlusconi, said exactly the same thing as well. We can see it. We can see what this is. And when von der Leyen makes statements like it was an appeasement mission because Hungary and Orban, who is the prime minister in Hungary, whether you like him or not, and I think a lot of the Western media paint him in a very bad light when he's in a really difficult position, when he goes over there to try and get peace, to try and put an end to this destruction of not just the Ukrainian economy, but the Ukrainian people as well. Imagine, they're not going to have any men to, you know, inseminate the next generation. They've all been, their army's over 40, 50 years old now. Now, we can see this, and people like von der Leyen and those in the EU, obviously they are living in a different reality to the rest of us. And this is really, really worrying, especially when, for those countries in the EU, they haven't actually got any sovereignty over themselves. It's the EU and von der Leyen that seem to be calling all the shots.
Yeah.
I don't see this ending well for any of them.
Yeah, a couple of points I'd come back to. What you said is, so one, Orban, when he got re-elected, was on a much larger mandate than before. but I think an election that's been recognized by independent observers to be free and fair. So he's obviously he's popular with the Hungarian people. They want him. They support his policies. Then the EU, they have different self-interest to you and I, and they want war. They absolutely deliberately want war because there's nobody in the EU and even the UK that like the established powers that is actually advocating for peace. So von der Leyen saying this is an appeasement mission. Well, she's not going out arguing for peace, doing a peace mission. Nobody is. And the ones that are arguing for peace, like Trump, like Corbyn, like Meloni, like Marine Le Pen, like Orban, like Fico, oh, they're all far right. Except for Corbyn, he's an anti-Semite. Which is as bad as being he might as well be far right, that anti-Semite.
But there's still this warmongering rhetoric coming from von der Leyen and the rest of them. But even Zelensky now is saying, yeah, we need a peace deal, because even he can see they're on the knees and they're not going to win this.
Yeah,
it's the only trick it's the only tool in the box they have, isn't it? It's just this warlike rhetoric. It's sick.
They have to have war more. And Zelensky, I think, is advocating for peace because he can see the writing on the wall that Trump's coming in, right? And Trump has said he's going to cut off the money and stop the killing, right? Now, the elites have to have war. This is what happens when the monetary system collapses.
All wars are banking wars, right?
Sorry?
All wars are bankers' wars, right?
All and all wars are bankers' wars, and then all wars are resource wars. Do you know about the Mackinder-Hartland theory?
No.
Okay, so this was, I can't remember how long ago it was, right, by some British imperialist writer who said that really, in order to control the world, you have to control the heartland, and the heartland is the Eurasian mass. If you control that, then pretty much you control everything. And then we have Russia, which has the most resource-rich nation in the world, and is a bulwark against Western hegemony because it's never been colonized by the West and has always resisted the West. And it's not an imperial power going out conquering other countries the way the Germans, the French, the Belgians, the Dutch, and the British did, and the Spanish. Russia doesn't have that legacy. You know, they don't really need it. The largest country in the world, relatively small population, rich in resources. Well, the West would love to get their hands on all those resources, all that oil, all that farmland. That fascist Putin has banned GMO products. You can't have GMOs farmed in Russia.
Just awful.
Awful. How are BlackRock going to boost their profits without GMOs? So obvious, because that's the other thing, right? It's, you know, the West goes to war in service of corporate interests.
Always has done.
Well, yeah. So the European Union has to have war in order to bring about a new financial system, to justify a new financial system and bring about all this chaos. And then when you said about lack of sovereignty, so I saw something yesterday, I think in Zero Hedge, that the European Union is going to fine Hungary, you know, 100 million euros and €1 million a day until they open their borders.
So they open their borders.
Yeah,
Hungary's over in that part of the world where it's sort of Eastern Europe, with you've got countries like Turkey, Afghanistan, it's sort of on their borders, so to speak, or pretty close to them. If they open their borders, it doesn't just flood in from or flood out through Europe; it floods in through the Middle East, right?
It becomes the gateway to Europe. You know, they'd have so if somebody wants to seek asylum in Hungary, they have to do so from outside Hungary, right?
This is what Turkey always threatened the EU, because Turkey did a deal with America on some F-16s, which they reneged on for years, even though Turkey paid them for them. I think they've finally got them now. But Turkey also they've got 4 million refugees in Turkey, right? And all through from countries that we've been blowing up and sanctioning and what have you, Iran, Iraq, Syria, etc. So they've got 4 million refugees in basically tents in Turkey that they have to look after. And they've been saying, well, we've got to look after them. So the EU, can you pay us to obviously facilitate them, because it's you're the one who's causing it, and we're basically holding all these people. And the EU basically were paying them, and then at some point they stopped, I think. But whenever the EU and Turkey have a spat, which often happens, Erdogan literally just says to Turkey, to the EU, I will open my gates if you don't do what I want.
Yes.
I will literally open my gates, and these 4 million people will flood into Europe. And whenever he does that, EU will go, all right, maybe we can talk. But now they're telling Hungary to do the very thing that Turkey, threatened the EU with.
Yes.
Are you trying to destroy?
Yes, they are. So they absolutely are, right? So so the people of Hungary voted for Orban, and they voted, and they knew what he stood for. They voted to preserve their heritage, their traditions, their cultures. They said, okay, we don't want to have open borders, so we'll vote for this guy who's opposes open borders. But that doesn't work for the EU, and it doesn't work for the UN replacement program. There's actually a document published by the United Nations which talks about, I haven't read it, I've looked at it, you can find it online, I can send you the link if you wanted to read a UN document. Right?
Yeah, I've gone to that. A sunny afternoon. Documents.
Yeah, but they want it. This is to encourage and facilitate the entry of non-European peoples into Europe in large numbers. Now, this is being funded. The trafficking of these people is being funded by NGOs, which is a really great way. It's happening a lot in Ireland. It's a really great way for governments to carry out policies without transparency, without accountability, at arm's length. They just provide funding to a particular NGO, and the NGO does the work. And then the NGO doesn't have the same disclosure rules as government does. And also the government can then say, well, we're not doing it. It's not us, vote for us, right? And then the NGOs, I've heard reports, these people are coming over, they're being given accommodation, they're being given mobile phones, they're being encouraged. The Irish government, I don't know if they're still doing it, was at one point advertising for people to come over. Now, I want to make I had it's a whole day. So a few times I've had few robust exchanges with cousins on this, right? And look, I'm an immigrant to the UK. I wasn't born here, right? And in fact, all my cousins in the UK and in the US, apart from the younger ones, right? All the adults weren't born there. There are actually a few young ones that have just become adults, but first generation immigrants. So I'm not in any way anti-immigration. I'm not in any way racist or xenophobic. I might be a white supremacist, admittedly, because I believe in peace. I'll accept that, right? But let me spell this out. So if I broadly, in since Second World War, there's been three types of immigration. There's the economic immigration of the 50s, 60s, and 70s in the UK from the Commonwealth nations. And then later on in the US through the H-1B visa program or whatever, right? So people came over from the Caribbean and from India and Pakistan for work because the post-war economy needed bus drivers and nurses and doctors, right? And they needed workers in the factories in Bradford. So they came over for work. They were vetted, they were cleared. And then they came over, they had to be responsible. I've come over for a job. I got to turn up. I got to earn money. I got to live respectfully and live a decent life. I don't want to end up doing crime, end up in prison, and then I can bring my family over, or I may already come over with family. And this is when the economy is booming and there is work for these people. And I think something like that happened in Ireland when it was going through its Celtic Tiger phase, right? Which is all based on borrowed money, all based on a mountain of debt, and so crumbled. So there's that. Then there's genuine asylum seekers. I remember I worked in a children's home many, many years ago for Vietnamese boat people fleeing the Vietnamese War. This was children that were unaccompanied, or people fleeing Iraq or Afghanistan, or even people that worked for the British in Afghanistan as interpreters coming over applying for asylum. That's another thing, right? Then there's what's happening now. There aren't jobs for these people. Economies aren't booming, and governments are bringing in large numbers of people, military-age men, and not necessarily from war-torn regions. A large group, I saw this week, a large group of people coming into Ireland are people from Nigeria. Well, these aren't refugees or asylum seekers. They're coming in from Georgia. In Britain, they're coming over from Albania. Now, Albania and Georgia and Nigeria may have their issues. They may be basket cases. But Britain and Ireland and France and Sweden and Hungary are not in a position where their economies are booming and we need workers. And then even bringing workers over creates a brain drain. So, because the ones who come over are the ones who've got a little bit of money that they can afford to pay the traffickers. They can afford to leave family behind. And then who are coming over are the men. Well, if it's war, who comes over, if you're fleeing war, are women and children, not men. They stay behind to fight the war, generally. So you got mostly men coming over in large numbers where there isn't sufficient resources, sufficient work, sufficient accommodation to take in this influx of people. Now, what does that create?
A lot of friction.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I always point out whenever you pointed out Georgia, Albania, and what have you there, I always point out the vast majority of immigrants that have come into this country in the last 5-6 years are from Iran, Iraq, Libya, Syria. Those are the four main countries that makes up the vast amount of immigrants that have come over in the last 4 or 5 years. And also the figure is, I think, less than 100,000 in the last 4 or 5 years. Turkey have got 4 million.
Those may be the legal immigrants. What happens in Ireland, because I know a lot about what happens in Ireland, is they get on the plane, and when they get off the plane in Dublin, they have no papers. Well, how did they get on the plane?
So you're saying that it's not Iran, Iraq, and what have you that's coming over right now. It's Albania, Georgia, and legal figures.
In Ireland, in Ireland, it's largely Georgians and Nigerians. In Britain, I don't know the exact numbers, but a large group are Albanians, right? Now, the same countries that had the lockdown policies are the same countries that have these open borders. Belarus didn't have a lockdown. They don't have open borders. Hungary may have done the first lockdown, didn't do it subsequently. They don't have open borders. Serbia didn't do a lockdown, doesn't have open borders. It's the ones that had the lockdown. In Australia, which has a population, I think, of about 27.5 million people, they plan to bring in 500,000 people every year. What will that do to local cultures and traditions?
If it's not, let's. Well, if it's, you think it's for war? You think they're bringing over military-age men for war?
One thing I've heard, and I don't know,
giving them a path to citizenship if they serve in the army, that sort of thing.
Path to citizenship, but also for policing the local population. You can then make these people local police force, and then they'll have no compunction about kicking in the heads of the local people because they're not related to them, they're not connected to them in any way. There's that, and then there's also the path to citizenship via the military, but then also it creates divide and rule. I don't know by how much London's population has increased over the last few years. I don't know, several million, certainly since UK's population since Tony Blair has been in power, and the economy's not been booming. I was for a while doing social work in another city, 2 hours away from where I live, and the local authority, they were so short of social workers, this started during lockdown, that they were having to bring in social workers from elsewhere and provide them with accommodation. So the local authority would pay for me to stay in a local hotel. So I was doing that, but at some point, I couldn't find hotel accommodation.
Because they're all full with migrants.
That's right. The government was paying to put migrants in there. And in Ireland, it's happening en masse. Ireland's not an imperialist nation. It doesn't have you can't say, well, this is payback for what Ireland did in India and Africa. Ireland's homogenous, Roman Catholic, Christian, small population.
They're destroying the farmland as well, aren't they?
Yeah, that's a whole other subject, how they're destroying the food supply,
Yeah,
right?
I'm wondering whether they're bringing these people over to work in the government-controlled food system.
No, the government control food system won't require a lot of labor. It doesn't take a lot of labor to breed insects. You don't need a lot of manpower for breeding mealworm and cricket.
We're not going to eat bugs. We're
I
not
know,
going
but
to change.
Bill,
We're not going to change our diet to suddenly eat bugs. I don't know who thinks that this is going to be a thing.
Bill
Yes, we're
Gates
going to eat
does.
the bugs and change the weather. No, you're not going to eat bugs and change the weather. Don't be fucking daft. Whoever told you is telling you that is just they're lying through their teeth, and you're being like, "I got your nose. I got your nose."
If we eat enough bugs, we might change the weather.
Ridiculous.
No,
Pay no attention to the Nord Stream pipeline being blown up. No, that didn't affect the atmosphere at all. But eating the bugs will.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So the town of Knock has some sort of monastery or something, or it's a shrine for Catholics in some way. I don't know, right? Very recently, the Irish government deposited 10%, deposited enough migrants to increase the population of Knock by 10%. Now, these are foreigners, non-Catholics, deposited.
Ireland are not going to bring them. Are not bringing them over for military reasons. Because let's face it, Ireland hasn't. So why are they bringing them? They must be. If they're doing it on purpose, they must be doing it for a reason. Some distance down the future that they're aware of that we're not.
Okay, well, let me bring in some other strands, right? Because it's the same agencies that are promoting this: the United Nations, the NGOs, Soros's Open Society, the WF puppet governments. They're the ones who are promoting all this, right? Well, what else are they doing? Well, one is Ireland has a very high rate of injection. So one of the things that I think could happen, and nobody really knows, is it's going to significantly lower life expectancy. People who've been injected, it's going to lower life expectancy. Other parts of the world, like in Africa and the Middle East, they didn't have such higher rates of injection. So you're bringing over people who are likely to stick around while the local people die off. And then it serves a couple of purposes. One is the idea that people from the third world are more easier to rule because they don't have the heritage of democracy the way that the West does. They're led by dictators and corrupt governments, and they're kind of used to it, and that's just how life is, right? So they're not as uppity as these white Europeans. The other is it disappears racism. That whole melting pot bullshit idea that if we all interbred with everybody else, we'd all become the same hue, right? And the other thing that it does is it destroys religion. And along
isn't it like going to happen naturally? Isn't what you're saying there? I'm just playing devil's advocate here, Rich, because isn't the logical prepare? But now we've opened the world up, and since World War II, and travel has become easier because of planes and what have you, and we're intermingling. Isn't it logical that we are going to interbreed, and at some point in the next 100, 200 years, you're not going to have many white people or many black people or many. We're all going to be mongrels, basically. To use a phrase that isn't great to think of humans, but
we'll be mixed. We'll be harmony people.
And religion has been, well, let's face it, religion has been in decline all of my life. Less and less and less people go to church and go to XYZ now than they used to. So isn't this sort of like where we're heading anyway?
I don't think it's so about religion being in decline, right? I think, and I'll come to that in a second.
I think it has been in this country for quite some decades.
But what happens is that rate of miscegenation, that rate of mixing would be very, very slow. Take Ireland as an example. If it was only asylum seekers, genuine asylum seekers, fleeing persecution, fleeing war or famine, then it'd be very, very slow. And also, if it was because the economy booming, well, it certainly wouldn't be happening now. because the economy is not booming. So it's being accelerated at a very high rate, perhaps at a rate that the local society can't absorb in any meaningful way and still retain its own identity. And then with regards to religion, so Islam is on the rise. I know when Eastern Europe opened up to EU countries and Britain was still in the EU, church attendance went through the roof because of the Poles that came over and still go to church.
Yeah.
Unlike the local atheist population, Islam is growing. But so for the West, it's in decline. For local British people, it's been in decline, but not for the new arrivals. Now, the point of getting rid of religion, and then we saw that with the Olympic ceremony recently, but also the promotion of pedophilia, the trans agenda. Come back. We'll stay with immigration. We'll go there in a minute, right? So we can try and keep this segmented, right? Is a people, but actually, even without religion and explicit religion, British people, local British people, native British people still have a culture. They still have traditions. You know, they celebrate Christmas,
Yeah. Easter eggs, blah,
Easter,
blah,
and
blah.
all of that, right? They have cultural roots and ties. When you bring in so many people like this in a way that they're not going to be absorbed in any sort of natural manner, well, then you disintegrate local culture, you destroy religion, you destroy faith. A people without faith, religion, and culture have no anchor. They're easier to control, which is why, you know, in so-called communist type regimes like Soviet Union and Enver Hoxha's Albania, which was the world's only atheist state, or in China, you don't have religion is discouraged. Because what a centralized state system wants is people to turn to the government as their saviors, not some benign, benevolent God that government doesn't control and has no say over. So people become easier to control. So then you bring in people who don't have a tradition of democracy. You set local people at odds with the new arrivals, and you destroy a country's heritage. You destroy their art, their architecture. You destroy everything that ties people to the past. Like what Kemal Ataturk did when he changed the Turkish script from Arabic to Cyrillic. Well, people had no access to their Islamic roots. Separated Turkey from the Ottoman Empire. And then anybody like you and I on the left who then questions this, well, wait a minute. Well, obviously, Gordon, certainly in my case, I'm obviously a far-right white supremacist.
And I'm definitely a misogynistic anti-Semite.
Oh, okay.
These labels just get thrown at you now. They don't, they don't have to have any background in reality. They just, he's a right winger. Why? Because he gets to the gym. What?
I know. I've seen that.
But this is an actual thing that that people do. It's been insane the last 5, 6, 7 years. It's been insane.
Yeah, and there is more insanity to come. But that leads us on to one of the things I wanted us to talk about, which is the whole notion of grooming.
I'm assuming you're not talking about grooming of a child here, and you're talking about grooming of, I don't know, a presidential candidate, for instance.
Well, no, I'm talking about it, the same phenomenon, but en masse, or propagandizing in a way, right? So I've said to you before, and for people who haven't heard this argument before, so Gordon, if you were to become Prime Minister of Britain.
Yes, okay, all right. Okay, day one, let's abolish income tax.
and if you weren't along the route, right, captured, corrupted, or compromised in some way, the values that you hold now would get to play out on a much larger scale. So, you are someone who's opposed to censorship, who's pro-peace. So as Prime Minister, you'd be like, okay, no more funding for war. No more funding for war. And we're going to allow freedom of speech. Freedom of speech. For example, right? Same values played out. Now, if I were made prime minister and I was someone who was a devout Muslim rather than the liberal Muslimish that I am, right? Then, and I wasn't captured, corrupted, or compromised in some way, then as prime minister, I'm going to put those values out.
Mm-hmm.
So now, whether it's whatever scale it's at, it's the same conversation, the same set of attitudes, beliefs, values, political perspectives for you and I as individuals in our small sphere, or for you and I as prime ministers. So it's the same pattern, and that's a fractal, a self-repeating pattern. And human behavior shows up as fractals. So we take a certain president who has certain, well, I would say Pedo Joe, right? He gets to play out his policies on a much larger scale. So he has no issue with the promotion of pedophilia for children. He has no issue with open borders, because all of that is something that encourages and facilitates child trafficking and the sexualization of children, right? Now, so one of the things I've been thinking about and seeing during lockdown, and I've said this to you before again, so forgive me, right? So this is what perpetrators of domestic abuse say to their partners. Men, usually men say to their women, I'll tell you when you can go out. I'll tell you what to wear. I'll tell you how far you can go. I'll tell you who you can mix with. I'll tell you who you can meet. I'll tell you what places you can go to, all this stuff, right? And I'm doing it for your own good. Well, that conversation on a larger scale was the government saying to us, we'll tell you when you can go out. We'll tell you who you can meet with and mix with. We'll tell you what to wear. You have to wear a mask. Don't worry about having your own income. We'll give you some money, pin money. And it's all for your own good. It's the same conversation. Mengele forcing medical treatment on Jews and gypsies and babies and stuff and disabled for the purpose of science or whatever, for whatever justification. Governments mandating medical interventions on people. People were coerced and pressured. They had no say. So it was the violation of the Nuremberg Code on a much larger scale. So that's the conversation for abuse on a much larger scale. Saddam Hussein, who I believe was a bully at school, then bullying his entire nation, bullying the Kurds on a much larger scale. So those are the abusers. So then lately I've been thinking about those that are the effect of them, the groomers, those that got groomed. There are people like me who from the start were like, no way I'm going to have that injection. No way, no way, no way. And then people like you, Gordon, and you said that, I'm going to say this because you said it publicly. You had to, and then you said, no way.
Yeah.
You got.
Yeah, my theory at the beginning was every country in the world here, even countries that hated each other, have raised the alarm bell. So obviously there's a fire somewhere. So that's what made. But I wasn't one of these people who was berating other people because they chose not to. I was like, no, what are your choice? It's like this is the way it is. And I went along with the rules to a certain degree, even though they were absolutely. I mean, I went out the one day with a mask, and then you walk in with a mask on, sit down at your table, immediately take the mask off, and just it was nonsense, and obviously not based in science, because if that was based in science, then the doctors are obviously nuts and the people making the rules. But when I had the booster, and that's not the booster, I had the second jab, and the second jab really knocked me off my feet. About 5 days I was really quite ill, and by that stage I think I was starting to really back away from it and really realize that no, I've been hoodwinked into something here.
Yeah.
And I was free to. I'm quite public about this, and I have been honest and public about it all the way through for the last 4 years, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you say you got hoodwinked. Consider this: you got groomed. Abusers groom their victims, and victims. And I've seen this with women because I work a lot in domestic abuse. They do the most insane, crazy things because they're so controlled and paralyzed and dominated and fearful of the abuser, and they want to please the abuser, and they want the abuse to stop. So if I just do this, then it will stop. So it's the same deal on a much larger scale during lockdown. Okay, well, if we all wear these masks, then we'll be free. Then this thing will die out, and we don't have to be afraid, and it will disappear. Or if we all wear the mask while we're standing up in a restaurant, but not when we're sitting down. It's just absolutely absurd,
My favourite political comedian is Jimmy Dore. Do you remember his joke? You went to see him as well in London,
Yes.
didn't you? Remember his joke? He said
which one?
it's like having sex with a woman with a condom on, and then halfway through taking it off for 15 minutes, and then putting it back on at the end just when you finish.
Oh my god! Yes.
And I was like, 15 minutes. Sorry, carry on.
Anyway, so there were all sorts of absurd rules that made no sense, like the barriers in the shops, but they were open on the side. And
my local shop has still got them up.
Right.
He's still got them up. I said, why have you still got these barriers up? And he went, we like them.
Well,
I think they're just like the little, because some people are arseholes. It's having a barrier between some people, even if it's invisible. I can assure he was like, we like them.
Yeah.
Not for any medical reason, or not because to stop the spread of anything. It's just like, no, some people we'd rather keep behind a barrier.
For safety reasons,
You might have been talking about me.
Yeah. Anyway. But there were all kinds of absurd and harmful practices that people were doing, like wearing masks was harmful because of all the bacteria and the fungi that grew inside the mask. Now, I wore masks for about 6 weeks, and then I was like, that's it. I'm not doing this anymore. This is BS. Why am I just accepting this blindly? So at that point, I woke up 6 weeks in, but there was no way I was going to have the injections. But I was doing the social distancing until I woke up. Until I got, there's another way of looking at it, I got that I'd been groomed. And so some people were oblivious to the grooming from the start. They're not going to buy what this abuser is saying, what the groomer is saying, the government, from the start. Some people woke up after, like me, 6 weeks into it or some other time. Some people got groomed into having the first injection, and then they woke up. Some people, like yourselves, took 2 injections. Some people took 3. Some people took 4. There are some people that have woken up to the injections, but haven't connected that they've been abused. They've been violated.
One of the reasons I had the second injection, I remember I was feeling a little bit like, I don't really want to have this second injection, but I was going away in December to Africa. And at the time, we were like being told, and like you say, groomed. We were being told you won't be able to travel anywhere in the world if you haven't got a double injection, a double vaccination. They were bringing out the NHS app and all that sort of stuff. And remember, they screwed that up, and I couldn't actually go. They didn't let me on the plane because the medical records at the NHS didn't have me down as the second. I'd had the second jab. So in the end, it actually stopped me from going abroad. That I went abroad. We changed our date and went a month later. But that was the reason I had the second jab. Wasn't for any medical reason or anything like that. It was because if I don't have this double vaccination, I won't be able to travel in the future.
You were coerced.
Yeah.
Like a perpetrator of domestic abuse will say to his partner, you're not going to go out unless you give me sex.
When I got to the airport, they wouldn't let me on the plane because the system said I hadn't had the second jab, even if I had. Meanwhile, people without the vaccination were getting on the plane because they had the PCR test and whatever the day before, and they could go on the plane. So I followed the rules, and they stopped me from going on the plane. And the reason I took the second jab was just so I could travel.
Yeah.
That is an abusive relationship.
Well, even before the requirement, if you want to leave this country, you have to have this medical intervention. Yeah, but I don't want this medical intervention. Well, you don't get to leave.
That's what we were being told at the time. Yeah. And then by the time 6 months come around, it was like, oh, you can take a PCR test and what have you, and you do it 24 hours before. Cost you money though. Made a lot of money during.
It made a lot of money. Now, Gordon, here's the same conversation on a much smaller scale. Guy says to his partner, whom he's abusing, you want to leave the house now? You got to give me sex before you go.
You've got to do this. You've got to give me what I want.
Yeah.
It's essentially the same thing.
It's the same pattern of behavior. So people got groomed. But some people don't get that they've been groomed and they don't see the signs. See, I never see child abuse. I've never seen it happen. I've never witnessed a parent abusing their child. What I see are all the red flags, the signs, the telltale behavior of the children, the parents, what they say, what they do, how the trauma shows up. So I've never seen Joe Biden abuse a child, but I've seen the red flags around him. Now I'm going to give you an example of this. And by the way, thank you for letting me spell this out, right? So I work a lot with domestic abuse. I'm working with, and I'm changing some of the details so the pattern's the same, right? I'm working with this woman, young woman, in her mid-20s. She's got three little girls. When she was 17, she met this guy a few years older than her. They were together for 6 years or so. 3 little girl children. A couple of years ago, he's out the picture. Thank goodness, because he was incredibly controlling. And one of the ways that he isolated her from her family, who could have rescued her, is he was really rude and nasty and aggressive to her family. So they stopped visiting because he'd just start a row with them. And he'd never agreed to going round to visit them. So essentially, he isolated her so that he was then free to abuse her through coercive control was mostly what he did. He didn't hit her. He'd hit the doors and the walls and break things around the house and not let her out. At some point, she says, no, enough. Get out. He gets out. We get involved. And we're supporting her and supporting the 3 little girls. She then meets this other guy. This other guy is different. He's charming. He's pleasant. The little girls like him. He plays with them. He's good with them. She's keen. She's looking out for the same thing, the same signs. She doesn't see them because he's different. He doesn't argue with the rest of the family. He's charming his way in. But as I find out, I got my radar. I'm listening because people that have been groomed get groomed again. They get groomed again. They get groomed again. They're in that pattern of behavior. So then I can see the signs and I start digging in. And I say to her, he can't come in the house when your 3 girls are there. He can't have unsupervised contact with the 3 girls there. And you can't supervise that contact, which essentially puts an end to the relationship.
Yeah.
No, I have no power to stop their relationship. Yeah. I do have powers to protect the children. I know stuff about him that she doesn't know, and I can't tell her. Right? Yeah. Now, she's pissed off with me, understandably, right? Because he was such a nice guy. He gave her money and everything. What she doesn't know is that he's not allowed to, the reasons why he's not allowed to see his own children and what they've said about him and what they've said about how he's been cruel to animals and to his oldest daughter. I can't tell her that.
Yeah.
So people who've been groomed are a magnet to be groomed again until and unless they wake up to the fact they've been groomed. To do that, they got to authentically ask themselves and be willing to consider that they have been groomed. I've been groomed here. Now, let me see if there's any evidence for that assertion. And then also be willing to consider that governments and the mainstream media, which act as their groomers, as a pedophile would groom, has his mouth to groom people, his words. Government has the mainstream media to act as their groomers, to act as their mouthpieces. So then they got to be willing to consider that governments, what happens with government, and this is a bit of a wake-up call for me as a socialist or someone with that legacy, that I want government to serve people. But what I can see as I'm learning more and more about the role of fiat currency versus money is that governments, the nature of all government is to expand its power, expand its power, expand its power, expand its power, and then it becomes abusive. At some point, it becomes abusive. For me as a social worker, I can see it in social work practice that especially the laws that Tony Blair wanted to bring in, which would have been an expansion of the child protection role that I have, the necessary child protection role that I have. Okay, children are being abused. I need just enough power to deal with that. But he wanted a database which would have children's details of all children on a central database. Are you kidding? If that isn't pedophiles, it's godsend for pedophiles. That's right. Oh, and celebrities could have famous people could have their children's data locked, but not you or I.
Oh, because
a two-tier data system, right?
Everybody's the same.
Yeah, he wanted a register of all home educated people, of all home educated children. He wanted us to have IDs. He still wants us to have IDs. So this extension of power, government keeps growing and growing and growing, justifying its own existence and expanding, and then encroaching upon people's liberties. And what we got right now is that process accelerated because they want to drive us to CBDCs. So people got to governments aren't serving us anymore. They stopped serving us ages ago. There's very little that they do that's good for us at all.
It's got worse. I'm 50, and that's half a century, and it has got progressively worse all of my life, and in the last 7 years has accelerated quite some.
Yeah.
And that's the truth of it.
Yeah, and just something else about the grooming process. So as well as grooming people into having those toxic injections, or wearing those harmful masks, or having that useless and harmful PCR test, something I've never told you about how harmful it is. I never had that, right? Part of it, manipulating, propagandizing people into taking it, this is for your own good. The other part is suppressing and isolating those that would wake you up to it. So like that perpetrator of abuse of this woman, isolating her from the family. So what perpetrators of abuse do? They isolate their victims from those that could rescue their victims.
Well, I've certainly been isolated from telling my truth and the truth about certain stories to the country. They've isolated me from explaining to the country and to the world and to my audience, even my own subscribers, that what they're being told is untrue.
Yeah.
And they've certainly locked me up and silenced me. And it's been done. I mean, I honestly, I know for a fact I was on, for instance, when Julian was dragged out the embassy, we got word he was being dragged out the embassy. We've seen reports come out that only could have come from state actors who would run this report. And I think it was a Palantir report. And it was the top 10 sort of most significant people connected to Julian Assange on the world basis, and then in Ecuador, and then in the US, and then in the UK. And I was number 7. So with how important that was, and the fact that when I went public about Julian's letter to me, my increase in subscribers that was increasing exponentially all of a sudden stopped, and I haven't had a single one since on YouTube. Wow. That was done on literally somebody said, I think, yeah, that guy has to be shut up. Because I didn't, all of a sudden, my own subscribers were emailing me and saying, Gordon, we haven't seen any of your stuff. I'm like, well, I'm dropping it. Go and search for it. You can't go to YouTube now and search Gordon Dimmack. The title of one of my videos, I don't know about Skripal, if you put Gordon Dimmack, the title, it just brings up Sky News, and I'm nowhere to be seen. So I have been isolated, as you were explaining there, for sure, 100%. And honestly, mate, I'm considering actually putting something together to sue them, because I know that this has been done, and I'm pretty sure with Freedom of Information Act requests, I might be able to get the proof.
You might be able to, and I'm coming back to you on that, right? On something about that. So then, the groomers, on an individual level, they will decry those that call them out. So if I'm like this guy did, right, running down this woman's family, arguing with them, isolating, but also they'll say that bad things about them. So on a larger scale, well, anybody who questions immigration is a racist. Now, it's a bit hard to call me a racist as a first generation immigrant. Oh, I'm a sellout. I'm an Uncle Tom. I've forgotten my own heritage. So then you don't have to actually consider the argument. So like this woman didn't distinguish this particular abuser, the one who fathered her children, to her new boyfriend. She didn't look deep enough, didn't distinguish it. So then people who are, and I see this a lot in the left, they think all immigration is the same. That the people coming over now, being brought over en masse by governments and NGOs, is the same as genuine asylum seekers, or genuine economic migrants who are coming to take up jobs that are there in a booming economy. And actually not digging in deep and look, well, what's going on here? Why is this happening? Asking the right sort of questions. Because they're discouraged from questioning. Just do as you're told. Shut up, roll up your sleeves and have your umpteenth booster. Shut up. And they're doing the same thing with climate change. Because, I get the argument, well, 97% of scientists, 97% of the ones that have been paid for, and I don't even know, Obama made up this figure. What about the Nobel Prize winner for physics in 2022? What about all these scientists that signed the World Climate Declaration? What about the co-founder of Greenpeace who say it ain't carbon dioxide? What about all the lies we were told about Russia? In April 2022, Russia was running out of weapons. They were using washing machines, apparently. The Guardian was telling us, right? And then we get groomed by a mission and we never ever look. See, people got to be willing to look, but to get that, you got to be willing to consider that you are being groomed and you have been lied to. And then I just got Ursula von der Leyen, The Guardian. What a fab. They wrote this, what I thought was a really, really great article about her re-election. It was a really great analysis. Bad for The Guardian, right? About which groups would be supporting her and why they'd be supporting her, right? And how good it would be, if she wins and stuff like that. Great article, well written. One glaring omission. The day before, the European Court of Justice had found that she'd broken European law with her contract for Pfizer for something like 7 to 10 billion euros, that she'd violated transparency rules. Her husband had benefited.
Her husband's on the board or something like that.
Just that omission. So they censor by omission, and then people never know. They just deal with what's in front of them and they don't dig in, and you got to dig in and you got to consider that you are being groomed. You're being groomed about climate change. You're being groomed about immigration. You're being groomed about inflation and money, and you're being groomed about the trans agenda and the sexualization of children, and you're being groomed about CBDCs and low traffic networks. This government slowly are grooming us on a much larger scale in the same way that a pedophile would groom a little child. Slowly. Thank you, Gordon. Now,
Right.
about the 1688 Bill of Rights. The 1688 Bill of Rights cannot be repealed by Parliament. It can't. It's not an act. It's not a law, and it's still in force. It can't be repealed by Parliament because it set up Parliament. One of the articles in the 1688 Bill of Rights is that there shall be no infringement on our freedom of speech. All subsequent acts fall out of the Bill of Rights, and we're not taught about the Bill of Rights. They don't want us to know. Another article in the Bill of Rights said Parliament are our representatives. The people are sovereign, and Parliament cannot pass legislation that is to the pejorative of the people.
Is this after Cromwell?
Do you know, I can't remember, because we weren't really taught English history in any meaningful way. We weren't taught about the Tolkoddle martyrs, right? We were taught just recite the kings and queens.
We were taught about the Holocaust over and over and over and over and over again. I know that much.
Oh no, but no, a particular Holocaust, not the Holocaust of the Belgians that killed 10 million Congolese.
Or the Holocaust, the Indians, for instance.
That's right, the Holocaust of the Indians by the British. You look at it.
So when was Oliver Cromwell? I'm wondering whether it came out of that and the Rump Parliament. So so he died in 1658, which this is going to come after Cromwell in the Long Parliament, isn't it? And the Rump Parliament. This is where the Bill of Rights came from.
Yep. Now, one of the things I've heard about the Bill of Rights. So if you go to the UK government legislation website, if there's been any changes on any act or law, it'll say so, and it'll say what the revisions are. There's been no revisions to the Bill of Rights because Parliament can't revise it. What I've heard, and I haven't checked this out for myself, but is it possible? Is it plausible? Would they do this? Could they do this? Is that the Bill of Rights on the parliamentary website isn't the whole text? That there's a few articles, one or two articles that are missing. They have not reproduced online.
Oh, really?
Now,
what are those articles?
I don't know. I don't know if this is true or not.
Okay.
Right, but it's worth verifying.
Right.
It's worth checking out.
It's worth checking what they're omitting.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. What don't they want us to know? Because they don't mention the Bill of Rights. We don't need a Human Rights Act. We have the Bill of Rights. The other thing that they don't mention, Gordon, is that juries have the power to annul legislation.
Yeah. Juries have the power to acquit whether the person is guilty or not.
More than that, they can annul the entire act. So
right, okay.
More and more governments have been moving towards doing away with juries because juries are expensive, inconvenient, and an assault on government centralized power.
I'm looking here, and it definitely is to do with Cromwell.
Right. Okay.
And the Glorious Revolution.
One of the things, Gordon, that you may want to explore, but there's a danger to you. You may end up as a white supremacist like me. Is Britain's or England's legal and lawful heritage?
Well, this is something. See, whenever people start, I find it interesting that whenever people start talking about the Magna Carta and English law and English history, you'll find an article suddenly appear in the Guardian saying, "No, this is all rubbish. What's going wrong? It's all conspiracy theory. Don't you worry about that. The Magna Carta has got nothing to do with law in this country, and there are only 4 articles are there, blah 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 blah." I do find it interesting whenever people actually start researching this stuff for themselves. The entire corporate media go, "No, it actually means this." It's really quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I've been told, and again I haven't checked this out, is that some time ago, lawyers, if you're studying law, you got to stop being taught. They stopped teaching them constitutional law, so they won't know about the Bill of Rights. Sorry,
was there a reason for that?
Well, the reason is it serves those in power. You won't know about the Bill of Rights.
Okay, so here's a thought, right? Mm-hmm. Because this is something that I'm going to start messing with, I think, over the next few months and start prompting is AI, because I think AI and AI in the public sphere is going to destroy entire industries. Entire industries overnight, I think, are going to disappear because AI can do the job. And one of those industries, I think, that is under threat, that might seriously disappear, is lawyers. Because why do you need a lawyer at £1,000, £2,000 an hour when AI will do the job better than that lawyer ever could? And it's getting to that point now where AI can look at law and history and argue a case better than a lawyer can. So they're going to disappear, which is the old joke, what's 1,000 lawyers at the bottom of an ocean? That's a good start. It looks like AI is going to finish that job off. So
maybe
I can get AI onto this and get AI. Can I ask questions? Google AI, explain to me the Bill of Rights, blah 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 blah, and that we'll be able to find the answer there, rather than go to the mainstream media who are just going to lie to us about it.
Yeah, but the AI may not be accurate. I've had arguments with
Because
AI.
that's programmed, right?
Well, it's what they have access to. What the big one, ChatGPT, right? So about a year ago, I asked ChatGPT about so I had a debate with ChatGPT because I like to argue about climate change, and ChatGPT said yes, carbon dioxide causes it, right? And then I then brought in photosynthesis,
Yeah, you've explained this to me many
right?
times.
But I did it with ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT conceded in this exchange that I had with it that CO2 is not the driver of climate change. But I was able to do that because I know enough about the climate science, having studied it myself elsewhere. So if I go to AI for a question about law, there's so much out there that I don't know. How do I know that just like with anything, with any solicitor or barrister, that what the information they're giving me, the answer they're giving me is accurate? And then the
Yeah,
thing about AI is that it's not creative because it doesn't see what gives us access
no,
to creativity are hormones,
yeah.
emotions.
Was it you who told me that June was the hottest on record?
I
June was the hottest month since records began. I was like, when did records begin? May?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Hotter than during the Roman period where it was so warm, we had lions in southern England.
Did we?
Yeah. Hotter than during the middle warm period, the medieval warm period, when we had figs and grapes being grown in Yorkshire.
Yeah.
In Chaucer's day. And then what happens when you have warmth like that?
You've changed my mind on climate change, Rich.
I've groomed you. I've groomed you.
No,
Good.
you changed my mind on it. I am no longer. I am now in the point. I am now on the fence, so to speak. I'm like, I don't know, but what I do know is they are lying to us, and that's not a good sign.
Well, that's the other thing. It's the same. Which brings back to grooming, right? So the people that lied to me about lockdowns, that lied to me about these injections, that said to me they're safe, effective, and necessary, at great harm, at the risk of great harm to me, I should trust them.
And these are the same people right now who are also lying to us about Trump, lying to us about Kamala Harris, lying to us about Keir Starmer, lying to us about the PPE contracts, lying to us about all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's so. I turn on the mainstream media. I usually have about a 20-minute period per day where I watch each channel just to get on. So that just not 20 minutes each channel, but 20 minutes total, where I just flick through and see, because I can basically absorb the propaganda in that 20 minutes and what they're trying to say. And that's all it is. It's like I'm not looking at it now for information. I'm looking at it. What is their spin on current events? And the recent one was obviously Paris. And these fires that were started that stopped the rail on the day of the opening ceremony. Now, if you've got a memory longer than a goldfish, which we have, which obviously the mainstream media don't, you'll know that France is in quite a turmoil and has been in quite turmoil over the last few years with the Gilets jaunes, with the repulsion of neoliberal politics from within the electorate in France. We've got the rise of the far right. They're calling it far right. I don't look at it through that lens.
The rise of conservatism.
Yeah, I don't look at it through that lens. Exactly. And you've also got, I mean, just recently there were like the Parisians were and the French had figured out if they all went to tributary streams around Paris, they could all shit in the tributaries, literally defecate so by the time the opening ceremony started, all the shit will have gone into the Seine and they won't be able to swim because they don't want all this money spent on the Olympics when they've got no, I don't know, energy and power going into the winter because of what's happening with the Nord Stream pipelines and what's happening with all the revolutions in French colonies in Africa. So they're in real trouble, and the Parisians and the French are obviously pissed off about all this. So I switched on Sky News and they're talking about it. And Sky News were like, is it Russia?
Yes.
They just openly said, is it Russia? And so I switched out to the BBC and the BBC were like, well, there's many people questioning here whether it's a state actor that's behind this. And I'm sitting there pissing
Oh,
myself, laughing on the sofa, going, "Go on, say you want to say Russia. Go on, say it. You want to say Russia."
Russia.
And he was like, "We've got no
All of a
evidence."
sudden, it's Russia.
That.
Yeah. So I think the Paris shutdown of the rail system is serving another purpose as well. What do you think? Because you said that you
I
think
think it's French people who are pissed off at their own government who are trying to shut down this Olympics because they're pissed off at it. That's what I think. What do you think?
they're priming us
For what?
for disrupting the November 5th elections in the US.
This is going to be a dumpster fire, you know. Do you know what date it's on?
November 5th.
Fucking bonfire night.
Yeah. But here's how they're priming us. So do you know what I mean by priming?
Yeah, it's just setting off a series of events that by the time something happens in 6 months' time that you would think, no, they wouldn't do that. By the time you get there, it's like, oh, yeah, that's the natural. Yeah, this happens now.
Yeah. And I saw it a lot with during lockdown. They'd introduce a conversation by saying we're not going to do that, or we might do that, and it would enter the public discourse and it would become a possibility. So there's an outage, and it disrupts the rail system. And then there's all these delays with the flights. I understand Manchester Airport, like and other airports, there's just long queues to make travel more difficult and more expensive.
Yeah. And you think they're priming us for November for that, because if you shut down the rail system in America will grind to a halt.
No, it's not that. But by the way, this is pure speculation.
That's not, I'm just asking the question.
Yeah. No, it's the internet outage. So if we take through the events that happened with regards to Trump's candidacy as the Republican nominee and what the globalists, the deep state wanted. Globalists, deep state, Davos, WEF, imperialists, warmongers, the war party, all the same thing, right? They wanted Nikki Haley. They wanted Nikki Haley versus Hillary Clinton, Hitlery or Killery or Gruesome Newsom. That's what they wanted. In the UK, we got WF Sunak or WF Starmer. That's the choice. They want us to have the same choice. They want the Americans to have the same choice. This warmonger Haley or this warmonger Clinton or Newsom. Well, how do they bring that about? So Nikki Haley kept running in the Republican primaries long after she didn't have any chance of catching up with Trump. Why was she burning her money like that?
To get delegates?
To get delegates. So then Biden and Trump have a debate long before
the convention.
Yeah, hasn't happened before. Hasn't happened. A month before the debate, the media is full of how it's just a conspiracy theory that Biden is senile and losing it and facing cognitive decline. He's as sharp as a tack. It's just conspiracy theory by white supremacists like me. Then they have the debate, and it's really apparent. And they set it up in such a way Trump wasn't allowed to interrupt him.
Yeah, they switched the microphones off, yeah.
Yeah, so Joe Biden did kill himself on stage. He killed his candidacy because the guy's just too old and infirm. And it became immediately apparent. So then that initiates the conversation. We have to replace Joe Biden. We have to replace Joe Biden to go against Trump. We have to replace Joe Biden to go against Trump. Then in the days before July the 13th, somebody places massive shorts on Truth Social and on Rumble that they would have made millions, perhaps billions, if the stock prices had crashed. They also somebody else bought millions of shares in CrowdStrike. No. They shorted CrowdStrike as well because the value of that would go down.
Let's talk about that, if you don't mind, for a second.
I'm coming to that, Gordon, because I'm starting with Paris, right?
Right.
Victoria Newland says, we don't need to worry about Trump being president. July the 13th, Trump turns his head.
This is insane. Have you seen the video?
Yeah, he turns his head. And there are all these citizen journalists, just ordinary people with their mobile phones videoing the whole thing. So the mainstream narrative can't hold. Imagine if there'd been all these citizen journalists at JFK's shooting, at his assassination. The truth would have come out. The mainstream narrative wouldn't have had any force or effect, right? So July the 13th, he gets shot. He's supposed to have died. He should have died.
They tried to take him out, so I think they took the other guy out.
So then on Monday is the Republican National Convention. Nikki Haley would then have been crowned Republican candidate. I've got the most delegates. I got more delegates than anybody else. Nobody else comes close. And then they've got to somehow finagle a way of getting rid of Biden and getting rid of Kamala Harris and putting in place Hillary Clinton. Now, whether it's going to be Clinton or Newsom or some other warmonger, I don't know, but it ain't going to be Kamala Harris. And I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a movement away from Kamala Harris. They're going to start running her down and saying, look, she hasn't got it, she hasn't got it, she hasn't got it. And then at the DNC convention, fun and games, the last half of August, they're going to replace her with somebody else. But
I have some information on Kamala Harris that I'll give you after this.
Okay, now the CrowdStrike outage.
Yeah.
Disappears lots and lots of data, but something else happens. The Dominion voting machines, which we were told in 2020 weren't connected to the internet, are now malfunctioning.
This is dodgy, right?
It's completely dodgy. So we have an internet outage. All of a sudden, somebody makes a lot of money on the shorts on CrowdStrike, and now we have an internet outage and a disruption in Paris. It's becoming commonplace for us to have these internet outages. The polls are showing, some of the polls are showing that Kamala Harris is now way more popular than Trump. She's going to beat Trump. She got no bloody delegates, right? She can't fill a school gymnasium. He's filling out massive stadia. He's getting more and more donations and more popular. Everything they're doing against him is backfiring. So, but the polls are saying no, Kamala Harris, because people have had enough of Trump, because he's just this racist white supremacist like me, right? And he's just the worst thing in the world because he's going to bring peace, right? You don't want peace. Peace is fascism. So then if the polls show that Kamala Harris is doing really, really well, and then there's an internet outage that affects the elections, because now internet outages have become commonplace, and it's no big deal when one happens on November the 5th or near the November the 5th to disrupt the elections. Well, anybody can tell, just look at the polls, that Kamala Harris would have won. So when the Republican supporters kick up an outcry, oh my God, they're domestic terrorists. It allows for that conversation to grow. Internet outages are going to become more commonplace.
There's two things I've got to talk about there. There's CrowdStrike and there's Kamala Harris. Which one do you want to pick?
Whichever one you want to go for.
Okay. We'll start with the Kamala Harris situation and the stuff in America, because I'm confused about this. Oh, mate, I'm a little bit confused, and I'll tell you why at the end. Because Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, promised, remember, he was only going to serve one term because of his age, and then he changed his mind. But when he changed his mind, nobody was allowed to primary him, and they didn't have nobody was allowed to stand against him, really, not even a Kennedy, which is quite something for that party. And then he has the debate with Trump, where they switch Trump's mic off and Joe Biden hangs himself with his senility. They had that debate months before the convention, which is really quite weird. But then as soon as he drops out, the entire media and establishment suddenly rally around Kamala Harris as his replacement. Now, who is Kamala Harris, you might ask, because I've seen people, on Twitter that I respect, people like Carol Vorderman, throw their hands in the air that this woman's wonderful. Really? Is she? Because let's look at her record, shall we?
Hold on. Well, Carol Vorderman clearly is unburdened by what Kamala Harris has been.
Yeah, she doesn't know this information, and she won't know the information because the media will be hiding it from her.
Yeah.
But Kamala Harris, remember, was a woman who, as San Francisco Attorney General, put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations, then lied about it. Sorry, then laughed about it when asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
Yep.
She was asked. She argued to keep prisoners in prison after they had served their term because they were such cheap labour. And indeed,
no, I think the Supreme Court, perhaps the California Supreme Court.
No, why I'm coming to that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Why I'm coming to it.
So wait a minute. I didn't know this. She kept people in prison after they served their term.
Yeah.
Because they wanted their labour.
That's not all she did. She blocked evidence being released, which would have freed an innocent man on death row until the Supreme Court demanded that she release the evidence. She, there was an overcrowding situation in the prison system, and she refused to free people, even though the Supreme Court said this is in violation of their human rights. And the reason she refused to release them, even though the court ordered her to do so, was because they were such cheap labour, and the inmates were fighting the California wildfires at $1 an hour. This is who Kamala Harris is, and when reminded of some of these facts on the debate stage, the last time she was on the debate stage by Tulsi Gabbard, who, by the way, is dead to me now, she was absolutely destroyed and had to drop out the race very quickly.
Without any delegates.
And yes, I'm calling her Kamala Harris, which, according to Joy Reid, means I'm racist and probably a misogynist now, because that's the way the rules are in America. It's preposterous.
Yeah, if you oppose her, you're racist and sexist.
Yeah, and remember, she's a great legal mind, people like Joy Reid always saying. She believed Jussie Smollett. Even after the Chicago Police Department were like, oh, hold on a minute, I think he's a lying little shit. She believed him, calling what happened to him a modern day lynching. This is how good her, radar is with regards to what is right. And the reason all of this is happening, right, in the same party, the same political party that rigged the 2016 primaries against Bernie Sanders, and then argued in court that we can do that. We can pick our guy in a smoke-filled smoking cigars in a back room because, hey, we're not actually, we're a private entity. And that's what they argued after rigging the primary against Sanders in 2016. Meaning the whole system of voting in that party is rendered useless. And this is why I'm confused.
They've rigged 3 primaries in a row.
And this is why I'm confused. Because all of this is happening in something called the Democratic National Committee. And the reason Joe Biden stood down is because he said democracy was the reason, and he was fearing for democracy. So this is why I'm confused, mate. Is it the same? Is it the Democratic National Committee in the same way it's the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea or the Democratic Republic of Congo? Is that why? Because clearly nothing about this process is democratic, right? You have clearly picked your person. You are clearly rigging the system date by date by date and manipulating things to try and put your own person in. It is clear to me, 100% clear, that no matter who gets into power in the United States and the United Kingdom, if you ask me, they don't have any power. The people who are running the country are the deep state. The people who are running the country are the unelected few that you cannot get rid of. It is the intelligence agencies. And if I was Trump, after they'd clearly started and tried to take him out, if I was Trump, I'd be speaking like JFK right now. And I'd be saying, if I get in, I am going to shatter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the wind, because they clearly tried to kill their own man. They couldn't get rid of one guy, so they got rid of the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Now they're falling apart because their scheme really depended upon Trump being shot, right? He's going to be taking extra precautions and everything. But the Democratic Party rigged 3 primary elections in a row. 2016,
of course.
And then 2020, they rigged it in favor of Biden by putting up so many lame duck leftish left-leaning candidates to split the entire left votes, and nobody had enough candidates to challenge Joe Biden in any meaningful way. And now they've rigged it just through fear. Okay, the nominee is Kamala Harris, when actually by DNC own rules it should be Kennedy, because he has the second most support after Biden before they kicked him out.
No, totally.
But we need to watch out. Trump is the fascist. Trump is the one who's going to destroy democracy. This is what groomers do, as they line us up to abuse us further.
Maybe this year's October surprise will be a successful assassination attempt, because I don't think they're going to stop.
Well, they're probably not going to. They're not going to stop, right? But I don't think it'll be successful.
I mean, these are the same people that absolutely ruined his first presidency. And I'm not a Trumper, as your audience will know. You well know. I'm not a big fan of Donald Trump. I'm not. I actually think the guy's pretty awful. But they ruined his presidency on a lie. And this nicely brings me into the other point that we wanted to talk about, CrowdStrike.
Yeah.
Because that original lie in 2016, who did it come from? The original lie came from a CrowdStrike. The lie that Russia had hacked the servers, the election, they called it. Russia hacked the election. How? Well, they're saying Russia hacked the DNC servers. CrowdStrike were the company that basically ran the servers for the DNC. And they evaluated the servers and told the FBI it was Russia. But then in closed doors in December years ago, and Adam Schiff was there, by the way, in that meeting, so he knew, they had to admit to a closed door meeting that we had no evidence whatsoever that Russia were behind this at all. We had a little bit of stuff that we saw that could be picked up by, but they've got no evidence that it was a state actor whatsoever. Right there, and the fact that the FBI didn't even investigate the servers, as Trump has said many times, right there is your conspiracy theory debunked.
Yep.
That Russia, that Trump was Putin's puppet, right there. And it was CrowdStrike that were behind it. So what do we know from this? We know that whatever CrowdStrike say is don't believe it, because it could very well be bullshit and ruin a presidency, right? But now it's got its fingers in all sorts of things all around the world, this entity. And all of a sudden they're responsible now and they're saying it was a Microsoft update. So they're trying to say Bill Gates was the fucking problem, really?
Yes.
This doesn't add up, mate. And
it wasn't
see, here's the thing. I'm getting really pissed off with this country, to the point where at the first chance I get, I will leave and never come back.
Go where?
As soon as my life is in order, I will leave this country and I will never come back. And here's why. We don't have any sovereignty. This country is run by other corporations and other entities. We, in this country, the people, the demos, have absolutely no kratos. We don't rule anything at all. What we want doesn't matter. We want a ceasefire in Gaza. We want them to stop selling weapons to Gaza right now. Doesn't matter. They propagandized us and bullshitted us completely for 2 years on Ukraine, when for 8 years previously, all they reported was Ukraine is the most corrupt country on the planet, and by the way, there's a real serious neo-Nazi problem. And then they suddenly reversed their tune as soon as Russia invaded. We don't have any sovereignty whatsoever. We don't have any control. The people who have the control are people like BlackRock, Palantir. And this is why I'm pissed off, because these entities are integrated into our most important systems in this country. I'm talking health. I'm talking airlines, traffic control systems, the data. And we have allowed an NGO such as CrowdStrike, they call that an NGO, right? They call it anyway. We have allowed NGOs to infect all of our systems. And if any of you have read Snowden, like I have, permanent record, definitely go and read it if you haven't, you will know that other entities, not just Americans, but especially the CIA for sure, will put fail-safes into these systems that they can put a switch in if ever an ally suddenly decides to do something that they don't want. For instance, there were contractors from America that were invited into Japan to overhaul the electrical grid. And the CIA got wind of it, and the people that went in there basically put a failsafe in so that if ever Japan went against America for any reason, they had a failsafe that they could literally switch off the electrical grid in Japan. And this is Snowden that's reporting this. I think it was Tokyo. So what do you think deep state NGOs, I mean, come on, CIA cutouts, like CrowdStrike, what do you think these organizations like Palantir are doing? They're not just doing it around the world with their enemies, they're doing it with their allies as well. And that means us in this country. This country doesn't choose anything. This country, our government, it doesn't actually choose its own destiny in any way. It has to go along with other entities and what they want. Because if they don't, this sort of shit's going to happen.
Yeah.
We're hostages, basically.
Yep. And CrowdStrike are partners to the WEF.
I'm shocked to my core to find out that information. I can't believe it.
But
I can't believe it.
Bringing you onto this country, Gordon, I don't think this Labour government is going to be at all stable.
Well, it's Israel's government, isn't it?
Well,
Israel.
I got a slightly different take on that, right? But just sticking with this Labour government, with Starmer's Labour Party, right? I think it's going to get more and more fractious. There's going to be more and more division.
You don't think it's stable at all?
No. And here's why I say that, right? They have no talent and they have no vision.
Yes, but they were elected in a landslide.
But they have no vision. See, people like Scargill or people like Tony Benn or people like Thatcher, even if you didn't agree with her, they had a vision, right? And they had a program that other people could get behind. Yep, we're for that program. We're for that program. The Starmer's Labour Party is built on a foundation of fraud. He's saying that I'm going to be doing these Labour policies. Actually, the policies that he's going to be implementing are the policies of the Great Reset. So there's a disconnect there. There's no integrity there. They're putting stuff in place saying it's for our own good, when actually it's to bring about this totalitarian techno-feudal system. And along the way, what's going to happen is British people are going to get further and further impoverished. Further and further impoverished. People are going to start resisting that. Because they don't have a clear, coherent plan and program that they can galvanize around, that they can project to others, they're going to start fracturing. They go in as a losing team. So yes, they have the largest minority, but it was through electoral and political manipulation.
Yeah, right, it was.
Yeah, it's now a losing team fractures. There's infighting. There's dissent. They become vulnerable to takeover. That's why the Tories have been in such chaos since Boris Johnson resigned. Now, Boris Johnson, like him or not, right? He was a skillful politician, able to navigate all sorts of challenges that he had to face with. Starmer's not like that. Starmer has nothing. He has no conviction, which is why he had to look at his speech every 2 or 3 seconds, unlike Farage or Corbyn, who are politicians of conviction and stand for something. Starmer stands for nothing. So then when there's protest and division, he's got no skill to deal with it. So what was it? He suspended the whip from 7 MPs?
Yeah, he suspended the whip from 7 MPs because they voted against it's the 2 child benefit cap, isn't it?
Yeah. So now that's going to breed resentment.
Of course it is. I mean, the whole reason that they said that they can't scrap the 2 child benefit cap is because it'll cost $3 billion a year. Meanwhile, that's exactly how much you're giving Zelensky.
Yeah. Well, money for war, not for children.
Money not for children,
not for feeding, caring for children.
Yeah. And all the stuff that you've said about it in the past, about saying that you would do exactly this, you have reneged on it and done a U-turn. These politicians, Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, you're right, they have no convictions. They also have no power. They get told what to do, and if ever they don't do what they're told, they're gone.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that. They forget it's got to the point now where I'm of the George Carlin mindset. Forget the politicians. Just forget it. The people running these countries now are not the politicians.
Yeah.
It's the same in this country. The politicians in this country are not running it. They're just not. Keir Starmer is not running. Do you think Keir Starmer made that decision? No, he was told what to do.
Yeah, he's a deep state puppet. Absolutely right. Now, the fraud will become more and more apparent. That we say we're going to make life better, they're actually going to make life worse for Britons. And as people, more and more people are going to wake up to that, because at some point when you're being groomed, you then start encountering and confronting the costs of being groomed, just like you did with the second shot. Oh my God, they hurt me.
Yeah.
That
do you know, by the way, you mentioned the 7 politicians. Do you know who wasn't on that list? Diane Abbott.
She voted against the 2 benefit.
I don't know. I can't imagine her voting to keep the cap. So did she abstain on it?
Worth looking at. They work for us, which has their voting record, to address that. But
sorry,
here's something that the Labour Party are going to do. I assert they're going to destroy the middle class, and how they're going to destroy the middle class is by impoverishing them. And one of the ways they're going to impoverish the middle class is by raising capital gains tax.
That's exactly what they're doing. Yeah, I heard people on the train complaining about that.
Raising inheritance tax. They're also going to raise capital gains tax. I think they're going to put it in place on unrealized gains, including on the unrealized gain of the value of your house.
That's exactly what the people on the train were complaining about. The one lady had her and her kids had inherited 4 properties. Her and her siblings, rather. I think she said she had 2 brothers and a sister. I think she said there's 4 of them. Inherited 4 properties from their mother or father that died a few years ago. And they were complaining that they said Labour were going to bring in a cap of 100,000. So if your house now is just worth 100,000 more than when you inherited it, you would have to pay 40% capital gains, I think it is, on that property, on unrealised, as you said. But then, and she was saying, well, I own these properties with my siblings. We don't own one ourselves. So does that mean that we just each made 25 grand 4 times what is it? But they were really quite worried that they're going to have a massive, like, £250,000 bill of tax and inheritance tax that they haven't got the money to pay for, which means what? They're going to have to sell one of the properties, right, to be able to pay for that. And if they're going to have to sell one of their properties, who's going to buy it? Well, at the moment, the people who are buying all the properties are BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, right? So this is all playing into what you have been talking about with the WEF.
They will own everything. We will not be happy.
We will not be happy, exactly.
That's right. So, but they're going to take it further. So, for example, our house, the mortgage has been paid. We own it outright. Thank you, Bitcoin. But there's been a gain in value. We've got no plans on selling it. At some point, they're going to bring in. We have to pay tax on a house that hasn't been sold or transferred on the unrealized value of that.
Which means you're going to have to pay for that. You're going to have to remortgage your house.
Yeah, I'm going to have to sell it to pay the tax. Now, people are going to resist. Excessive taxes cause revolutions. The salt tax, the Boston Tea Party, right? People will resist. Thank bloody goodness. And then what you've got is a weak, fragile, fractious government with no vision, no skills, no political nonce. I mean, Starmer is a midget. He's not as big as the height of the heel on Putin's shoe in terms of political acumen compared to Putin. This doesn't mean I'm a fan of Putin, but that man has political acumen and political skill. He's a politician worthy of his salt, right?
I'm a fan of him. I've got to say that. I'm going to put it on.
He's great for the Russian people.
He's a brilliant leader, and Xi Jinping.
He's done great for the Russian people, absolutely, right? But Starmer's nothing. How's he going to deal with this? He's got no answer. So it is going to fall apart, and there's going to be changes, and the whole thing's going to fracture, and they'll get more desperate. A bit like what's happened in France, a bit like what's happening in Germany with the coalition, a bit like what's happening with the Democratic Party imploding in the US, right? The same thing is going to come here. And what people need to know, now please share this video, even if all you do is share this bit, they are going to come at us with more taxes, more fines, more fees. In the UK, it is illegal, it is unlawful, it is immoral to give money to any agency that's going to use that money for the purposes of terrorism, genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. Go to bit.ly/make-war-history, and then you will see the specific statutes that the UK government is breaking by sending money to Ukraine, to Israel, for killing people, and also killing people in Yemen. And you and I are breaking the law by giving money to this agency that's supporting war and terrorism in those areas. bit.ly/make-war-history. There's a plug.
I'm putting that. I'm clipping that up and putting it on TikTok. That was great.
Yes, thank you. We're going to resist every single way. And Gordon, it is falling apart. It is so falling apart. It is so falling apart.
It is. And I've been saying for a long time that there's a collapse coming, and this is what's coming. And this is why people like I and you have been telling our audience, put your money in assets, take it out of the bank. Your fiat money is going to be worthless. This is why we've been telling them this, because you look at every empire in history, this happens. It goes nuts at the end of it. You look at the end of the Roman Empire, Caligula wanted to put a horse in as senator. Then what else happened at the end of the Roman Empire?
Gordon, stop being so horses. That's just...
I'm sorry, mate. I'm sorry.
Don't be such an equine supremacist, right? Anti-equine. I'm not having that on my channel. I believe in freedom of speech, but you can't say that about horses.
I'm sorry. Horses can be senators, and people can be horses.
Men can be women. Men can be women.
Talk about
and a guy can have his bollock hanging out at the Olympic ceremony.
Mate, seriously. I was watching it, and then all of a sudden, it went. It was like watching, what's that movie with George Clooney in where there's a vampire and it's a Tarantino movie? I was watching it and it was so, this is a movie about a bank heist. And then 20 minutes, half an hour into it, all of a sudden they're all vampires. It was like watching that. It was quite nice. And it was like, oh yeah, the people on the boats and it's pissing down my rain. That's quite funny. It's really quite shit, this is, isn't it? And then all of a sudden, it just turned into something that you would see at Funny Girls on Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and then got really dark. What the hell? Because I don't know anybody who is into this stuff, mate. I don't know anybody who thinks this stuff is everybody I speak to just thinks, this is debauchery on stage. This is pedophilia almost. That's everybody I speak to is saying that. I don't know anybody who looks at this and goes, "Oh yeah, this is quite." Oh, maybe I know one person in America who thinks that this is the way forward for the world. So why is this thing that less than 1% of the population actually are, and very few of us talk about and support? Why is it being foisted and jammed down our throats at every opportunity? Because what I saw on there was crazy. It was the last days of Caligula. It was just, in Rome, they just had all these orgies and what have you, and the lines between men and women started getting blurred back then as well. I just feel as if this is indicative of history and history repeating itself, and there's going to be a collapse very soon, because this bullshit that they're trying to fill our minds with, we're not taking it in. Certainly nobody I know is, or very few of them. And I feel as if this collapse is coming, and when it does, all hell's going to break loose.
But the collapse is good news. It needs to collapse. It does,
yeah. And I'm happy for it to happen. And because something else needs to obviously be replaced with it. But obviously they're going to try and replace it with something very similar to that, which, as you rightly know, is ban digital currency.
Yeah, they're going to fail. That's going to fail, because what are they building it on? Who are the people building it? They're building it on top of this collapse. The people that are instigating this collapse, the people that are telling us that men can be women and women can be men, and 4-year-olds can choose their sexual identity, and pedophiles are minor attracted persons and is a viable sexual orientation like any other adult orientation. No.
You come around my kids and say that.
That's right. People aren't going to stand for it. It's
come into my front room with my kids and say that. You watch how far I haven't got kids, but you know, that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, no, it's so anti-nature. It's so anti-nature that people aren't going to put up with it because it has no integrity. There's nothing solid to it. It goes against the fundamentals of being a bloody mammal.
I'm not saying, I won't go so far as to say it's unnatural, right?
No,
And
pedophilia is unnatural. What I mean like it
okay,
happens.
no, I wasn't talking about pedophilia. I wasn't talking about that.
Okay.
I was talking about, you know,
Specifically, that
the
you're
man
not
being a
arguing
woman, the
for
woman
it.
being a man thing, and what have you. Because in the animal kingdom, you do get gays, you know,
Gay thing
bisexual,
happens.
you get that sort of stuff. That happens.
Yeah.
And you even get, there's a species of cuttlefish that the males who are not the alphas, right, who are not the big cuttlefish that get all the lady cuttlefish, there are male cuttlefish that disguise themselves as women to try and blend in with the harem of the alpha cuttlefish in order to get the occasional with one of the lady cuttlefish there. So there's all in nature. There's all these sort of things happening. So that's pedophilia, as far as I'm concerned. You're
I was
descriptive.
talking about pedophilia. Pedophilia is anti-nature because it's genetic suicide. By the way, bonobos are as close to us as chimpanzees. Where chimpanzees are brutal and violent, and you know they meet a chimpanzee from another troop, they'll kill that chimpanzee.
Yeah.
Bonobos, they meet a bonobo from another troop, they'll have sex, male or female, they don't care. They're the hippies of the primate world.
Well, if I am reincarnated as a monkey, I do have to hope that it's a bonobo.
But anyway, no, my point is the pedophilia, the sexualization of children is genetic suicide. It's unnatural. It cannot hold. It has no foundation whatsoever, and people will resist that. Now, for them, you know, they'll try it on and it'll go as far as it does, right? But for them, the purpose that it serves is that sexualized children are easy to control as adults because they haven't got the wherewithal. They're so disturbed and traumatized. They can't think. They need to be led. And then if I don't know whether I'm a boy or a girl, male or female, I'm so confused. Well, I'm also easily led. So that's where that serves. And then of course it destroys culture and tradition. And I can remember the days. I didn't watch the Olympic ceremony. I saw clips of it on Twitter. I can remember the days sitting with my dad watching it. It was a wholesome affair. You'd get that. I suppose the problem is that France doesn't have any heritage of arts or culture or music or architecture. It's just been this barren tundra for thousands and thousands of years.
It's not really got a rich history to it can rely on, has it, France? It's not got really, you know, art and music and anything that, you know, it's the pedophiles. It's the that's really what we're all about.
It's not like they're a Christian nation, you know, that can celebrate the Last Supper, Da Vinci's great painting. No, they have to import their own modern LGBTQ plus pedophile version of it, and a bloke with his bollock hanging out at the Olympics. Now, here's the really absurd thing about it. Videos of the Olympic ceremony are being scrubbed off Twitter, scrubbed off YouTube, including being scrubbed off the Olympics' own YouTube channel.
And they're saying it's for DMCA copyright reasons. Really?
But it's their own video. It's their own video.
Does DMCA stand for Don't Molest Children, asshole?
Very good.
What it stands for?
Very good. Very good. That's right. But that's what that shows is how great the backlash has already been.
Yeah.
Just to that. Now they're testing the waters like groomers. They'll push a little bit, pull back, push a little bit further, pull back, push even further the third time, pull back. But at some point, the victim gets their salvation when they say no. Don't wait too long before saying no. Say no now and spread the no now.
And stop giving your taxes to war criminals.
Absolutely.
That's the way I think we need to start. That really is. Keep
your house. I'm going to find out about putting all that stuff in trust. I think it's easily done. If the elites can do it, we can do it too.
Right.
bit.ly/makewarhistory and spread the word and share this video. And Gordon, absolutely fabulous. Always enjoy these talks with you, mate.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, mate. We'll catch up very soon.
Yep. All links in the description below, and share this video far and wide. All the best. Bye-bye.